everyone. So today I'm really excited to get to sit down with two of my former supervisors, mentors, and now published authors and have a conversation about leadership, community, writing, and legacy. I'm so excited for this moment, and I think we'll get a lot out of it. These two strong Latina women show me a lot about how to work, how to empower others, and stay motivated. And it's my hope that part of this conversation will help others as they go through life as well. Eneida and Emma, thank you so much for agreeing to do this again. To get started, I do want to read both of your bios. I know it's kind of awkward to sit there and listen to it, but there's a lot in your bios that I think help frame the conversation. And I also just want to show off what amazing people you are. And I think your bios will capture that. So I'll start with Emma's. Emma Violand-Sanchez was born in Bolivia. And she's an educator and fierce advocate on behalf of immigrants and refugees. She received her BS and MS degrees from Radford University and her doctorate at George Washington University. During her 40-year career with Arlington Public Schools, Emma became the first Latina elected to the school board. She has consulted throughout the US and Latin America and published widely in the field of education in both Spanish and English. Her awards include a Fulbright Fellowship, AAUW American Fellowship, the James Hunter III Human Rights Award, the Maldive Community Service Award, Washingtonian of the Year, an Arlington Spirit of Community Award, and the 2024 Marquee Who's Who Lifetime Achievement Award. An amazing career, and thank you so much, Emma, for being here. And Eneida P. Alcalde immigrated to the United States as a child, transplanting her Chilean Puerto Rican roots into Pennsylvanian soil. A Pushcart Prize-nominated writer, her poetry is grounded in her multicultural background, merging lyrical narrative and personal reflection to explore questions of belonging and displacement, individual and collective memory, historical legacies, social justice, and cultural resilience. A Methodista, Eneida graduated with an MA in creative writing and literature from Harvard University's Extension School. She draws inspiration for her writing from her migrant family and ancestors, her young daughter, and the places she has called home, from Valparaiso and Cochabamba to Washington, D.C. and Singapore. Thank you, Eneida, for being here today as well. I want to get started with my official questions. So now that I've read your short bios, very impressive work. As a way of adding dimension to this introduction segment, what would you like to highlight or emphasize from your short bio and why? And if anything was not said, what would you add?
It is not the awards that I have received, but I think the experiences I have had in my life, be it as an immigrant from Bolivia to the United States, but more than anything, my inspiration and my work comes from being an educator and also being a community builder, in the sense that all the different organizations that I was part of in establishing, be it in Bolivia, Maestro Más, the rural education, in the United States, the Dream Project, the Escuela Bolivia, LULAC, all of those have been a community type of leadership effort.
It's not the awards you've gathered, which are impressive. It's the impact and relationships you've managed to create. Eneida, same question for you.
I think something that is not perhaps evident is that I lead my life through my heart, and I speak to my inner child. As a little girl, I moved to the United States from Chile. My mama is Puerto Rican, and my daddy was Chilean. And that drives me. That was a formative experience at 7 years old. I am so grateful for that because it shaped who I became. It led me to what I've done, what I've pursued, and where I am now. That the reason I write is so that I can figure out what I'm thinking, because usually what I'm thinking is in my feelings. And in order to be clearer for myself to have a clarity. And then I turned to writing.
We come from backgrounds. It's not just the bio, right? There's parents, grandparents, ancestors. And I think when I first graduated from college, I came back to the area and you were both very fierce leaders here. I want to dive into the topic of leadership, which is sometimes elusive to some, but it's a quality that you both possess and you do it so well.
A great question. For a long time, I did not consider myself a leader. I was in a different world. I went through life and did things that I wanted to do, and I cared about things I wanted to care about, and I involved myself because I cared about those things. I would say that even in as a child and high school, I grew up in a very conservative town, small town where there were very few Latinos when I was there. I realized early on that I cared about us and about immigrants, and that oftentimes in my classes, I might be the only one in the higher education or the higher levels. I don't remember, it was a long time ago, but the advanced ones, whatever that level was. And sometimes other students would say things. I would be the only person there that could say something back from experience, or just to challenge assumptions about our community. And then that turned into other issues, other social issues about being poor or discrimination, racism, LGBTQ rights. And I was just passionate about it. I went to college and I got involved in that again as part of, I don't know, you say protest, but activism on campus. I remember we took over, I think it was called the Hub at Penn State because there was a lot of racism going on campus. Student leaders were getting death threats, things like that. This was around September 11th time period. And it was very hard for my friends of color. And during that time period, it was very challenging. And I learned that because I cared, and because I had privilege, that I was willing to use that if I could. And so, in a nutshell, I'll say that when I went to the Peace Corps and I went to Bolivia, I think that's when I first started realizing that I was a leader. And the reason why I learned that is because I was with other students who came from very different backgrounds. Some of them had never traveled abroad. Some of them did not have that cultural knowledge, and I led them. And what that means to me, I think when I saw your question, is that a leader for me, is a doer. That's what I had always seen myself. Like I just do it. Like if I see something that I can help in, I will fill that role if I can. We're already doing great work. I think that's another aspect of leadership, is that to see what the community is offering, to know that you are moving things forward, but in a way that you are understanding that there's other people and other gifts there.
As a leader, you're not creating everything from scratch. You have to take stock of what's there. And often there is some good that you can build upon, and you just have to add the part, like what you're good at. Emma, do you have a memory of when you realized you were going to be a leader?
Well, I really appreciated listening to Eneida. I think that gave me sort of another perspective about leadership and how is it that it may start at an early age. And now I realize more than ever is because I was good in school. You know, when a person or a child excels in school, you know, there is a sense of I can do it. For me, the experience of I can do it, be it I can go and join the children, the children of campesinos in Bolivia in the catechism, and my family saying yes, that was, I'll do it. And it's that doing that Eneida talked. And my learning style, since I did my dissertation on learning style, is that I'm also very feeling oriented and action oriented. Schooling and education became an anchor for me, as well as my faith. When I started in Arlington Public Schools working with immigrants and refugees back in the 70s, 76. And when I became the supervisor of the programs there, I felt these students need a sense of belonging. And I really, I guess from my own experience, I was the advocate for them to have a place where they would feel they would lead and they would, and it was amazing. And that, because I believe that leadership is developed. I don't think anybody's born as a leader. I think it's experiences.
You both were immigrant women leaders surrounded by people in positions of even greater privilege. So how did you manage to advocate for yourself and for your ideas and those that needed advocating for?
Came to the United States as an adolescent. So I already had a strong language, and I also had a strong sense of identity of who I was. And so I felt empowered of who I am, right? And so later, when I became the first Latina school board member, and I was going to be pushed aside, that I was not prepared to be the chair of the school board, then I brought some of the people that supported me, and I say, this is what is happening. So I think it's important not to be silenced.
Yes.
To own our own voice and our own power.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think that is definitely a challenge in terms of ensuring that the immigrant or the people who are the I think the life and blood of an organization continue to have a voice and ownership and leadership in that organization and a say in what that organization does for the community. I think, to be forthright, I think that was definitely very challenging for me when I was working in a nonprofit sector. Uh, Not so because I didn't care about it, but I think there's so many aspects of running a nonprofit, from funding to management. But I think I tried so much to keep up with those aspects so that I could be with the people who were part of that organization. And what that means is that I remember going on Saturdays to Escuela Bolivia. I didn't have to go. I went because I know it meant so much to the staff and to me to connect with the staff. Because I remember a lot of the teachers were there from the beginning of Escuela Bolivia. And that to me was so important, to talk to them, to get their insights. And they were so passionate about it. It formed how I ran the organization, and how I worked with the board and worked with funders and how I spoke about things. And I think that was really valuable.
I was an intern for you at Escuela Bolivia, now at Futuro, and you were the first executive director I worked with. And you had a way of leading teams and managing logistics and all the craziness, the board, everything. And it really astounded me. And I think it helped me when I got to do that later on. It's very challenging. And you were a great example. And you led with patience. Like, I remember I messed up sometimes, and you always were very patient. And you had this like innate commitment to the mission that I think is so important and necessary for executive directors and leaders in our communities that are dealing with underserved populations. And I want to get into how your book is described as a love letter to your late father. How did his influence shape your leadership style?
Oh, gosh, my father, wow. I'm a daddy's girl. I was the first girl in the family. My grandma had three boys, and I'm the eldest granddaughter on that side of the family, and it was a girl. So I was always very close to my father. But he had left Chile. Yeah, he had to leave Chile because of what was going on. And he told me stories, and I heard stories from not just him, but my family members and his friends about how he was in Chile and the type of leader he was. He was, and then these are things that I took example that were an example for me and very impressionable as a child. So for one, his family or our family at the time in Chile, it was either you were okay or you were not okay in terms of economics. There was no middle class. So we were okay. That was, but at the same time, did not, he was not removed from people who were not okay. And he stood up for people who were not okay. He was definitely an activist, I would say, against Pinochet. And he had a lot of friends who died. He was at risk himself. He was a very brave person, very brave. And even when we went to move to the United States, he went from being a business owner and running businesses and people going to him for everything under the sun as a business owner and he was so loved by his employees and so loved by his friends and community. And I saw that again years later after he died. He even though the distance, etc., he was so loved in Valparaiso for who he was because he was willing to put his body on the line. He left Chile, then he returned to Chile with me and my mom because he thought that Pinochet would go away. They thought, but then he continued. And they're like, well, we cannot have our children grow up in this environment. We need to go back to the US, even though we are okay as a family, but there's still these risks. And education was also very important for my family. And they felt that myself and my brother could have a better education in the United States, a better life. So then we moved back to the US in the 80s. And I saw him go from this person who ran businesses to doing anything he could in the US to earn money, janitorial work, factory work, and then eventually he became a truck driver. I learned from him how to be brave and I learned from him how to be strong. I don't have the same uh, strong personality. I'm a little bit more, I guess, diplomatic. Maybe because I'm a woman, I don't know. He could get away with certain things as a man, but he definitely. I remember one time. I'll give a story because maybe this will clarify what I'm trying to say. Is he went to get gasoline in a car, and another man came up. A man from the U.S. came up and he's like, "Oh, he's like, where's your accent from? Because he had a very heavy accent. But my dad looked like me. Even he looks even more like European, I would say. He's blonde, So like, where's that accent from? Are you German? Nope, nope. And then he's like, and he finally figured out he's Latino, and the guy couldn't believe it. And my dad was just like, yes, very straightforward. And then other times, sometimes people would say things about Latinos and my dad would just really retort. And they would be oftentimes, I think, what he and I share in some ways is that our appearance, sometimes we don't come off as Latinos. People don't think we are and might say something that they would never say, perhaps to someone who might be more stereotypically Latino. And you can either choose to be silent about it or to speak up. And he taught me to speak up. I needed to write the book because I've never met anyone like him. And he, in large part, I am who I am because of him. I believe in social justice because of him. I believe that I am no different than someone who was born in a different position than me. And that all comes from my father.
It's amazing, Anita. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I know, Emma, you talked about some very strong family members that also helped shape your leadership and taught you the bravery, like your tia Meche, your mother, your grandmother. Do you want to talk a little bit about them and how they've shaped your leadership?
Well, starting with my mother, having 6 daughters, and the reason why I think that being one of 6 daughters in a country like Bolivia, where my father, he kept on wanting to have a son, and my mother praying, even when she was pregnant, that the child would be born a boy. And so, I became very sensitive to the fact that, being a girl, it was not wonderful. But my mother, being a woman who, first of all, her mother died when she was 1 and father when she was 3. When at age 40, she is left with 6 daughters because my father, had another woman and was separated. And so she had to educate us. My mother had a very strong influence in me and my grandmother. But my grandmother really valued education.
So you've both written Emma a memoir, Eneida a poetry book, and it touches on family frequently, family themes. So I would like to know from both of you why you decided to share such a personal part of you with the world, and why now.
My father passed away in March 2020. And at the time, it was the height of COVID, and I live in Singapore, and I could not travel back for a long time because I also had a baby.
Mm.
And there was a risk at the time there was a risk that I would not be able to get back into the country because borders were closing and being very strict. And I was also very scared of COVID, whether I went back and then contaminated my family there or came back and contaminated my family here. At the time, there was no vaccine and we did not have an understanding of what COVID was. That's something I never expected. I had been writing fiction, a lot of fiction up to that point, but the world that became dystopian. And I didn't want to write about dystopias anymore because we were living in a dystopia. And I decided that I needed poetry. Poetry is the history of the human heart. And you can understand history in a different way if you read poems from people at different stages. And so I felt that this was a really fitting way to pivot and to honor and write about my father. And also it allowed me to tap into my inner child.
Mm.
And write from a lot of it is from that perspective, not all of it. Um, and perhaps to not only help me and to honor him, but also perhaps to share it with the wider world, because my father's story is it's an immigrant story, and my family is a story of migration from my great grandparents who fled fascism in Spain to Chile. My grandfather was the first in the family born in Chile. To my own family fleeing authoritarianism to go to the United States. And and it's not just our story. And there are different reasons why people migrate also, but I wanted to write about that.
I think it's amazing that you were able to pivot from one writing style to poetry to deal with what was our reality back in COVID times, which was uncertainty just everywhere. I do want to ask Emma, your book is obviously a memoir, and it reveals parts of your story that a lot of us that know you have known you for a long time didn't know. Your experience in the world of politics. What made you willing to share that full side story? And did you ever have any second thoughts? Why did you publish it now?
One of the reasons why I started writing, I'm not like Eneida. I don't like writing, to be honest. But with a group of friends, we wrote, one of our friends who died, she encouraged us to write about aspects regarding our loved ones who passed away, who died. And at the same time, I had read a book about transitions and life quakes in our lives. That's when I started writing about Al, my husband, who died in the war in Vietnam, and the life quake of his death, but later finding out that at least, I have accepted that, but many people say, no, it couldn't have been that. But it was the result of the war based on the certificate of death that he died by a self-inflicted wound. So I had kept that trauma hidden for years. And that has influenced many, of my problems that I had in my personal life, marrying in Bolivia, as well as dealing with the feelings of abandonment, and writing about how I found out about how he died, and all the trauma that I had later on in my life, gave me the courage to share that with my friends intimately. But then David Berenger, who had retired from Virginia Humanities, and he had interviewed me, and I did share my story with him. And he said, Emma, you have a story to tell. We can work together. And so I started writing, or through the questioning with him and the interviewing with him, not just about Al's death, but also about my failed marriage in Bolivia, my depression later, with my marriage with Jim Hayner in the United States, his alcoholism, his emotional abuse. And I wrote it. It's part of my story, and it's part of my life. It has influenced my life. I feel that my book was healing, and right now I feel that, now that I'm 80, I have nothing to fear.
Yes, and Emma, I learned so much from you about life, from reading the book, even though I knew you and I had worked with you. But so thank you for having the bravery to share your story like that, and being an open book. An open book I can talk to, which is even more amazing. And thank you. I do want to get into the next part of our conversation, which is about legacy in the future. What do you hope readers are going to take away from your works?
My memoir is also an opportunity to shed the lights on the contribution of immigrants, our resilience, our dreams, and how we enrich our community, helping other people understand the challenges faced by immigrants, the challenges about identity, the challenges about language, the challenge about maintaining your own bicultural identity against the myth of the melting pot. When I talk about my book with when I speak to students in high school, they just love it. They feel they can identify with the struggle.
Eneida, you've been an immigrant like your whole life. Everywhere.
I'm trying to digest.
A new immigrant multiple times. And so does
Yeah.
that experience ever get easier? Is it easier in some places than others? What has helped?
My dad helped. I think Emma said something earlier about belonging, about making sure that others know that they belong, and through her work. And my dad did that for me. I would say that my mom also did that. And I will add that my teachers, I was very lucky. I had, not all the time, but for the most part, I had very caring, loving teachers. I remember the first day in school in the US, we were asked, it was second grade. I, at that time, had been in the US, I think, for a few months, so I could converse in English, but I could not read or write in English. The assignment was to write about our summer break. So I did my best. Basically, I wrote it English and Spanish. But at the end of it, he read what I wrote, and he couldn't read what I wrote, and I could not read what I wrote. But he didn't. I remember this moment. He could have, not on purpose, but it could have made me feel less. But he did not make me feel less. There was a twinkle in his eye. There was a slight smile. He put me aside. He made me feel safe, that it was okay. It was okay. And that he was someone I could trust, and he believed in me, and I belonged there. And I had several teachers like that through the years. And in addition to my family. And so I think when Emma said that about belonging, about welcoming families, about when her book about sharing that with immigrants, I can see how that's so powerful and so important. I believe toward the end of my book, there are two poems. My book is, because I'm also a fiction writer, it kind of has a plot, but they're poems. At the end, there's a resolution. And there's two poems at the end. The second, they're both bilingual poems. So they are English and Spanish. There's an English. I translated them. I wrote them. I think I'm bicultural also, so I write. I think in Spanish. I write in both. And I wrote the poems. One is inspired by Federico Garcia Lorca,
Mhm.
who inspired many Latino writers across the Americas, and who died for who he was. And he could have gone into exile. He could have left. He was a famous poet when he lived in Spain, but he could not leave Granada because that was so important to him, that sense of place. It made him who he was, and he refused to leave, and lo fusilaron. They killed him. But that stubbornness, that bravery, he was different. Um, but he stayed true to who he was. That I think not only inspired writers, but I think just culturally, Las Americas, you can see the influence in different writers, and also he's well read in the Spanish world. So I dedicate I was inspired to write about him in one of the poems toward the end of the book, because it talks about resilience and speaks to the immigrant experience as well. And the very last poem, Las Cosas Bellas, the beautiful things, and it speaks to migration and how this world is forged by migrants, stitch by stitch.
I want to see if either of you, both of you, have a parting thought, or other Latinos that want to become storytellers, that want to write, that want to share with the world.
Since I don't like writing, very different from Eneida, writing can be very healing. It's now, of course, the idea of writing a book and publishing can it be overwhelming, but writing just for writing's sake, even if it's your own journal or whatever, I think it can be healing. Now, the publishing world is competitive, but again, the system has changed so much that you can self-publish, you can do hybrid publishing like I did, where a company accepts your book, but you pay for certain services, the formatting, whatever. And at the same time, it's very empowering. That's what I would say.
Mhm.
It's completely empowering.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anita, you published with a certain I don't know what to call them, but Ethel. Can you tell us a little more about that, and what you would give advice to other storytellers out there?
Mhm. I have been writing my whole life, even from as a child, because it was just something I did for myself. Um, Definitely picked it up more in high school, and I just continued to do it. Even in my professional life, I was a grant writer or just wrote a lot in the nonprofit space. Even though that's not creative writing, I think those skills are transferable. And I think that's an important thing to note in case anybody who might not be doing creative writing, but if you are writing as a lawyer, in education, even doctors, I would say you can transition to creative writing at some point in your life. The blank page will always be there for you. It's important to fill those blank pages with our narratives, because otherwise someone else will tell your narrative. And it's important for you to have your narrative out there, our narrative. But back to Ethel. Ethel is an indie publisher. They're very dedicated to the art of poetry. The person who founded Ethel and who runs Ethel, they hand stitch all the books. It is a labor of love. And I was so honored when they selected my chapbook, because I had dreamt of being with a publisher like this. And there are not that many who do this, because it is more intensive in terms of the labor and the time, and you have to really put a lot of time into it to do this instead of just having the more modern way of doing it. However, I really wanted to, because I think poetry is inherently of the people, and it was something that people did, spoken word. It's from when man or for humanity started. We all, poems, poetry goes back a long time, and it's supposed to be in the public space, accessible. And so I was really honored that they selected it, and I just loved knowing that it's being hand stitched, and it's a Philadelphia-based press. And my father and my family grew up in Pennsylvania, not far from Philadelphia. So that also meant a lot to me. I was like, wow, this is exactly who's supposed to publish this. And they've taken great care, and they've been such a great partner in the whole process. And that's why also when the books are taking a little longer to get out because they're hand stitching them. But that's okay. That's okay. But I will say that before I got to that point of publishing a book, there's a lot of, in addition to books, there's a lot of literary journals and magazines out there that if you are someone who is interested in writing, there's different genres. There's poetry, there's fiction, there's nonfiction, there's hybrid, there's also visual arts. There's so many different um, ways of being published nowadays. So if you, and there's also, they're very, I think, more accessible in some ways, and perhaps you can build up to a book later on. So if you're someone who is interested in doing so, you can, access or work with journals, literary journals, and submit. They have guidelines on how to submit. It is a competitive process. However, I think that there's always the opportunity to do so, just to be persistent, to be stubborn, to read a lot, and to write, and because the more you write, the better you are at your craft. I think sometimes, though, I know that I was a non-traditional creative writing student, and I have come across in my work as an editor a lot of non-traditional paths toward creative writing. So, for example, people like Emma, who might have had a career as an educator or a psychotherapist, a doctor, and then they turned to creative writing. I think that's okay too. I think that's part of the beauty of it, that anyone at any point in their journey can do it. In writing, you get no. No, we're not going to accept your poem. No, we're not going to accept your story. No, we don't like this. No, no, no. But you know what? Okay, I'm just going to submit again. I'm gonna submit to another one, or I'm going to keep improving my story, keep improving my poetry, or try to submit elsewhere, and just be very persistent about it, not be derailed by a no. Perhaps you might be like, "Oh, I wish I would have gotten it published here," but to keep at it. I think that's something that from my immigrant experience, I perhaps have been confronted with that a lot already in my life. And for me to have something declined, it's not, okay, that's just part of the process. It's part of the learning process.
I think also all the no's and then finally a yes probably adds to the relief and joy of the yes and that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I do believe if you really want to publish, you can self-publish,
Yes.
because my book is hybrid published. So I'm not a Michelle Obama that Random House came to ask me to write anymore. So it's what is your purpose, and it could be a few copies that you have, and at the end it's your work.
And I like the idea Eneida pointed out that there's always a blank page waiting for you. And so anyone that wants to tell a story, whether it's memoir, poetry, or fiction, that blank page is there for them to fill out. And Latinos should be doing that because we need to fill up more of the airspace, memory, and get our stories out there. So I thank you both for doing exactly that and sharing your personal life, your analysis of life through your books. I think I'm a better person for reading Emma's. Anita already read a few of your poems, and I've connected with them. I remember my own father, my own history, and I think it's amazing that I know you both. I know two published authors, and I'm so excited. And I thank you again for talking with me and sharing your